Hello and welcome back. In the last lesson, we saw how we can work with React's useEffect function to work with side effects. And in fact, we put all the scaffolding in place in our center button to work with side effects, but we haven't actually introduced any. And so in this lesson, we're going to add back in the original event listener that we were working with a few lessons ago. So let's just do that. I'm going to change this console message now so it says effect add listener register cleanup, which indeed it does. And I'll also change the cleanup function so it says cleanup removing listener, and it does just that. Now this isn't quite what we wanted, because if you remember, every time the state of active changes, the effects function is called. So whether active is going from false to true or true to false, it will always call the effects function. But what we wanted, well, we only wanted to add the event listener when active was true. So what we can do is we can just put a simple if statement here, if active, run this log. And if active is false, I'll actually put a different message in. So we can see that the effects function has been called, but we did nothing. So with that, this should all work, except we've got one small problem, and that is we're referring to this active variable here, but it only exists inside the center button function body. But we can solve that easily enough. We can just move these functions and place them bang in the middle of the function body. It's perfectly permissible in JavaScript to create functions inside functions. So this should all work. Let's just bring up the browser. And I'll bring up the developer tools. And we can see our center button was mounted. The body of the function ran, so wrote inactive on the button. And then the effect was called because the effect is called whenever the component mounts or unmounts or the state changes. So the mount called the effect, but because the initial value for active we decided would be false, when the effect function was called, it found that active was false, and so it just did nothing. And importantly, it didn't register a cleanup function. So consequently, if I unmount this button, there is no cleanup to be called, and so there is no message from a cleanup function here. If I remount it now, we'll begin to look at what happens when we change the state by pressing the inactive button. So let's just tidy up the console, and we'll press this button, and active is going from false to true. So this time when the effect handler gets called, it registers our event handler. And in fact, if I now click ASDF, we can see it's working just fine. And if I toggle it again, we can see that the body of the function gets called, and that enables the button to display inactive. And then it removes the listener, and then it runs the effect because the state has changed. And this time the state is inactive, and so the effect did nothing. And again, we're now back to essentially where we were here. And if I clean up the console again, if I say go to true, it runs the body of the component, so it prints active on the button, and it registers a listener. And again, I can do ASDF, and if I toggle it back to inactive, again, it prints something different on the button, it removes the listener, and it calls the effect another time. And now if I hit ASDF, you'll see nothing is actually happening. And finally, we've looked at toggling the button off when it's inactive. Let's see what happens if we unmount the button when it's active. So we've got a cleanup now registered. So what we expect to happen is that when we unmount the button and it's active, we can see the cleanup occurs. It removes the listener, and when I hit the keyboard, nothing's happening. And that is the problem we originally encountered solved. So this has been quite a grand tour of useEffect. There's quite a lot to process. Again, if you would like to investigate this further, you can go to the React Dev webpage and again go to the Learn section. And you'll find this time in the fourth section down here, Escape Hatches. If you look to synchronizing with effects, and then over here, how to write an effect, declare an effect, you'll find there's loads of information about how to work with the useEffect hook. So I hope you found this helpful, but for now I will finish this lesson and I'll see you in the next.